In this video, we're going to study Article 4 in Classical Liberal Arts Academy's Modern Arithmetic 3 course. This is article number 4. In our first few articles, we learned some important definitions. In Article 1, we learned what units are, we learned what numbers are, and we learned that numbers can be expressed by words or by characters. And we learned that there are two systems of notation that are used today to express numbers with characters: the Arabic system of notation and the Roman system of notation. In Article 2, we began to learn about the Arabic system of notation. We learned that the Arabic system of notation uses 10 figures to express any number. And we haven't figured out yet how to do that, but we're going to in these next few lessons. We learned that the system is called Arabic notation because it came from Arabians who brought it to Europe, and that the Arabians learned it from India. We also learned that it's called the decimal system because it makes all of its numbers with just 10 figures. In our last lesson, we learned about the first place or the first order of numbers. In Article 4, we're going to learn about units of the second order. Units of the second order. Now, just to provide some review before we start this lesson, in our last lesson, in Article 3, we learned about the units place, the first order. And we said that units from 1 to 9 are expressed by simply writing one of the 9 figures in Arabic notation. We said that if the number stands alone, if the figure stands alone, or if it stands in the first place on the right side of a number, it represents the number of units and is called the units place. And that would work for the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. 1 through 9 can be written using the 9 significant figures in Arabic notation. But what happens when we get to the number 10? If we have 9 units and add one more, we have 10 units. How do we write the number 10 in Arabic notation? This is what we're going to study in article number 4. Okay? This first rule reads, 9 units and one more are called 10. 9 units and one more are called 10. How do we write the number 10 in Arabic notation? It is represented, the number 10 is represented by the figure 1. But how can we write the number 10 with the figure 1 if the figure 1 signifies 1 unit? It says the number 10 is represented by the figure 1. Well, let's keep reading. But the 1 occupies the second place from the right. When we write the number 10 in Arabic notation, we use the figure 1, but the figure 1 is written in the second place. The figure 1 occupies the second place from the right. And we write a 0 in the units place, or the first place. So in order to write the number 10, we don't need to invent a 10th figure. We don't need another figure in Arabic notation. We're only going to use the figure 1 and the figure 0. We're going to use the figure 1 to mark that there is 1 10, and the figure 0 to mark that there are 0 units. So we're going to write the number 10 like this. We use two places. Two places. The first place we learned in Article 3 is called the units place. And in the units place, we write any number between 1 and 9 to show how many units there are. But in the number 10, there are the first order, the units order, is empty or vacant, as we learned. So we write the number 0 in the first place, and we write the number 1 in the second place. And this number, written with 1 and 0, expresses the number 10 in Arabic notation. So we're now up to 10 different numbers with the same 10 figures that we learned in Article 3. Okay? Now, here we see there are 0 units and there is 1 10. There is 1 10. Here we see that there are 0 units again, but there are 2 10s. 2 10s is called 20 in English. Remember, this is only the name of this number in English. In Spanish or French or Greek or Italian, the name would be different. In English, 2 10s are called 20, and we write them with this figure in Arabic notation. A 2 in the second place for 2 10s, and 0 in the first place for 0 units. 2 10s makes 20. Here we have 0 units, 0 in the units place. The units place is empty. And we have 3 in the tens place, 3 in the second place. So there are 3 10s and 0 units. 3 10s makes 30. Next we have 4 10s. 4 10s is 40. 5 10s, 0 units, makes 50. 60, 6 10s and 0 units. 70, 7 10s and 0 units. 80, 8 10s and 0 units. And lastly, 90, 9 10s and 0 units. So from 10 all the way up to 90, we can write all of those numbers in Arabic notation with the same 10 figures that we learned in Article 3. The same 10 figures. We can write all of these numbers and we're still using the same 10 figures. How are we doing that? Now we're starting to see. In Arabic notation, we use different places or orders to express different numbers. All right? The number 10 has a 1 in the tens place and a 0 in the units place. 20 has a 2 in the tens place. 30 has 3 10s. 40 has 4 10s. 50 has 5 10s. 60 has 6 10s. 70 has 7 10s. 80 has 8 10s, and 90 has 9 10s. Now, you may think that this is very simple, but I can tell you, when you get into more difficult arithmetic and you start getting confused and get problems wrong and have a difficult time solving problems, it's going to be because you forgot this simple lesson. It's these simple lessons that cause confusion and errors later on because students forget about them or don't think about them. This is how Arabic notation works. Numbers are written in different orders. There are only 9 significant figures and 0. That's all there is. If you remember that and think of numbers, don't think of this as 40 units. Don't think of it as 40 units. Think of it as 4 tens. That's what's written here. 4 tens. When you hear the number 70, don't think of it as 70 units. Think of it in Arabic notation as 7 tens. Okay? You'll see later in arithmetic that this becomes very, very helpful in solving problems. But most students, even though they all will say that they know this, forget about it and don't use this knowledge later on when it's time to solve problems. Okay? So remember, don't think about these numbers as 30 units, 40 units, 50 units. Instead, think about the number 30 as 3 tens. Think about the number 40 as 4 tens. And think about the number 50 and so on. 5 tens, 6 tens, 7 tens, and so on. Okay? Let's go on to rule number 3. When a figure in a number stands in the second place from the right, so here's the first place from the right, here's the second place from the right. When a figure in a number stands in the second place from the right, it represents one or more units of the second order. When a number stands in the second place from the right, like the 5 here, it represents one or more units of the second order. So this number 5 represents 5 units of the second order. 5 units of the second order. 3 units of the second order. And lastly, rule number 4. Units of the second order are called tens. And I've already been using this word in this lesson, but here we have the clear rule. Units of the second order are called tens. So the first order we learned is called units. We learned that in Article 3. Here in Article 4, we learn that the figure in the second order represents tens. Units of the second order are called tens. Units of the first order are called units. Units of the second order are called tens. And that's why I said, when you see the number 30, think of it as 3 tens. Because that's what Arabic notation tells us. It tells us there are 3 tens in 30. The place that they occupy is called the tens place. The tens place. This is called the units place, the first place. This is called the tens place, the second place. Units and tens, the units place and the tens place. So let's go back to the numbers that I wrote in our last lesson. I wrote the number 1,975. Look at this number, 1,975. How many units are there? How many units? The answer is 5. There are 5 units. The figure 5 is written in the units place to tell us that there are 5 units. Now, how many tens are there? How many tens are there in this number? There are 7 tens in this number. There are 5 units and 7 tens. I'll give you another number. I'll just take the number 1776, the year that the Declaration of Independence was written, 1776. How many units are there in this number? There are 6 units because the figure 6 is written in the first place, in the units place. It tells us that there are 6 units. How many tens are there in this number? There are 7 tens because the number or the figure in the second place is 7. That tells us there are 7 units in the tens place, or 7 tens. Okay? That's what's taught to us here in rule number 4. So that's all of the content for Article 4. Now, in Article 3, remember, we learned about the first order, the units place. We learned that the 9 significant figures in Arabic notation are used to represent 1 or more units, from 1 to 9 units. We learned that the figure 0 is used to mark that an order or a place in a number is empty. So we learned in Article 3 how to write the numbers 1 through 9 in Arabic notation, or how to write 1 through 9 units in any number. But what if there's one more than 9 and we have 10? How do we write the number 10? We write the number 10 by using the figure 1 in the tens place, or the second order. And that's what we study here in Article 4. How to express the numbers 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and 90. By simply writing the number of tens in the second place and putting a 0 in the units place. Okay? When a figure in a number stands in the second place from the right, it represents 1 or more units of the second order. Units of the second order are called tens. And the place that they occupy is called the tens place. So this first order is called the units place. The second order is called the tens place. So, at the end of Article 4, if you study everything carefully, you should be able to write the numbers 1 through 9 in Arabic notation, and you should be able to write the numbers 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and 90. And remember, we still have only learned 10 different figures in Arabic notation, and we can now write all of these numbers with just 10 figures. 9 of those figures are called significant figures because they denote something, and the figure 0 represents an empty or vacant order in a number. Okay? 0 stands for nothing. Nothing in that order. Okay? So, review Article 4 on your own, study the printed lesson in the online course, and make sure you understand everything so far from Articles 1 through 4. All right? All of this will be assessed on a test that will be posted for the course. You need to watch these videos. You can review them as many times as you like. Study the lesson printed online in your course materials, and make sure you know everything in every lesson, because as I said, the lessons are going to build and build and build, and if you don't study carefully, what's going to happen is later on you're going to get confused and run into trouble and start making lots of mistakes. And when you try to figure out what's wrong, you're going to have to go all the way back to one of the first lessons where you didn't study carefully. And that's what really will ruin your studies in arithmetic. If you try to hurry through these first lessons and don't study them carefully, it's going to get you into trouble later on. Take your time, learn everything exactly, study your lessons for mastery, and build little by little, one article at a time. That's how we study arithmetic in our Modern Arithmetic 3 course. And if you are patient and study carefully, you'll do very well in the art of arithmetic, which is very important in your studies. So be patient, study carefully, and master every lesson, one article at a time, and you'll do well in the long run. I hope that's a helpful guide to Article 4. Now it's time for you to study. God bless your work.